Game of Thrones is littered with events that seem small at first, but due to one change in decision, could have ended up being fatal and changing the entire trajectory of the story. One of these moments was at the very beginning of Thrones, after the king rides north and names his brother-in-arms as Hand of the King, and betrothed his oldest son to his friend's oldest daughter. The king and his party begin their journey south back to King's Landing. Along the way, they stop at the Trident, the infamous place where King Robert won the rebellion by defeating Prince Rhaegar. Here, there's a confrontation between the Crown Prince Joffrey and the youngest of Ned Stark's daughters, Arya, where the prince threatens to kill her. It even seemingly would have if not for the interference of Arya's direwolf Nymeria. The event unfolds with everyone relatively unscathed. No life was taken, though Joffrey is left with an injury on his arm and his pride. This single moment really laid the foundation for animosity between the Lannisters and the Starks early on. Even more so than Lysa's letter about the Lannisters possibly being involved with the murder of Jon Arryn, although that was her doing. But what if it had gone a bit worse? What if Joffrey Baratheon lost more than a bit of his pride or flesh during that terrifying encounter on the Trident? How could the story change if Nymeria had killed Joffrey just to protect her friend? Let's find out. Our story opens on the Trident, as the king's party sets up camp for a moment of rest before continuing to the capital. While her sister Sansa is off wandering with the prince, Arya plays by the ford with her friend Micah, the two of them whacking at each other with wooden sticks, pretending to be knights while the wolf Nymeria relaxes in the shade nearby. Before long, the two of them are interrupted as the prince appears, Sansa at his side with a flagon of wine, having been drawn by the clatter of pretend swords. Like canon, after hitting Arya on the arm by mistake, Joffrey takes this as a sign to assert his dominance over the butcher's boy, Micah, finally being given some meager justification to indulge in his innate cruelty. Arya, unwilling to see her friend suffer, attacks the prince, and a fight ensues as Joffrey swings wildly in agitation, while Arya does what she can to avoid the sharpened steel meeting her flesh. Ultimately, Arya lands on the ground, and Joffrey Baratheon hovers over her with a manic look in his eyes as he levels his steel at her chest and threatens to gut her in his rage. Before he can even think to do anything, though, Nymeria has leapt from her spot in the shade, lunging at Joffrey, now aware of the threat he poses to Arya. She jumps higher than she did before, avoiding his sword hand altogether, and going straight for Joffrey's throat. Joffrey screams, his sword falling into the dirt while he flails beneath the mass of fur and muscle. Arya leaps up to pull Nymeria off, but by the time she does, it's too late. Joffrey's screams have turned into something else, something horrible, strangled and struggling before going silent altogether. Sansa screams in horror, running over to her prince's side. She pushes her sister away, yelling about her poor prince and asking what Arya's done to him, to no response. After a moment of stunned silence, looking at the dead body of the prince, Arya runs away with Nymeria into the woods. The girl is frantic and unsure of what to do as she looks at her friend, fur still wet with red, and her head tilted innocently with no comprehension of what she's done, and the dire consequences that now await the dire wolf. But Arya does. To say that Nymeria would suffer is an understatement. If the king found her after what happened to his son, she wouldn't just be killed, she'd probably be skinned too, and made into a throw rug for the queen. Though that wouldn't happen if Arya had anything to say about it. So Arya forces Nymeria to leave for the sake of preserving her life. And later that night, she's dragged before King Robert and Queen Cersei, who is distraught at the death of her oldest son, wailing in sorrow and anger about his demise. The prince's body lays on the floor for all to see, though not showing the full extent of his fatal wounds, wrapped in a cloth. King Robert looks down at the shrouded body of his son. It almost seems like he's dissociating at the moment, refusing to believe that this is indeed real. For all their differences and all the time they didn't spend together, Joffrey had been his child, to the king's knowledge at least, even though he himself hadn't been much of a father to him. And now as he looks down at the covered body, he realizes that now he'll never get the chance to be a father to Joffrey, never get a chance to right his wrongs even if he wanted to. The king feels like a failure, but as it stands, he doesn't have time to wallow in self-pity just yet. The king demands to know what happened to his son, down on the Trident. It's clear that he was savaged by an animal, but Robert wants specifics on how it went down. Cersei shouts that it's clear what happened. Arya and her rabbit wolf murdered their son in cold blood. Arya defends herself, though with a shaking voice, saying that that's not what happened. Joffrey attacked her, and Nymeria just tried to defend her. Ned doesn't know what to think as he bears witness to this event, nor does King Robert in his grief. Though it's clear that the prince was killed by a wolf, there is no evidence to suggest that it was some heinous personal attack ordered by Arya, especially since Joffrey can't speak in his own defense anymore. The only option that they have to get to the bottom of this is to bring in Sansa, as the only other witness to this event. The oldest Stark girl is clearly distraught. After all, she witnessed the murder, and she was even the one who stayed with Joffrey's body before getting help. It even tried to save him, as evidenced by the blood on her hands. When she first sought help and they saw her hands and her body, they thought that she had done it. But after closer inspection to the wound, it was too savage for a girl to make, so they absolved her of suspicion. Cersei demands to know the truth from Sansa, who has been silent this entire time. She looks back and forth between her father, the king, the queen, her stained hands, and then finally between her sister and the body of the boy that she would have married. The girl has no clue what to do or say. She's torn. She blames Arya for Joffrey's death and ruining her life by taking the boy that she was supposed to marry and one day love. But at the same time, she's also scared. For all their fighting, she still loves Arya. She still worries for her, and what the king and queen would do if she lied and said that Arya started the fight and attacked Joffrey on purpose. She thinks of her mother Catelyn crying, and looks at her father Eddard, wondering if they would hate her if she incriminated Arya, and something happened to her as a result. Eventually, she caves, and says that a fight did break out. Joffrey and Arya were attacking each other, and Nymeria just jumped in. This isn't enough for Cersei as she demands to know who started the fight. Sansa says that she doesn't know. It all happened so fast. She doesn't believe that Arya meant to hurt Joffrey. Nymeria just acted on her own. They should blame the wolf and not her. Cersei refuses to accept this, saying that intent didn't matter. Her son is dead. With Nymeria in the wind with no way to locate her, all the blame that she can muster falls onto Arya Stark. She demands justice, vengeance for her lost son, and demands that Robert treat this girl accordingly, like any other criminal who would have dared to harm royalty would be treated. Robert looks at Arya, who is clearly frightened. Had she been anyone else, he might have done what Cersei wanted, but there wasn't much that he could reasonably do to her. Sending her to the wall was out of the question as she was a girl, and for all his anger and grief in that moment, he couldn't bring himself to harm Ned's daughter as a form of punishment either. If he did, that would surely make an enemy out of the North, and he would lose one of his only friends, especially if he decided to make her pay the ultimate price for his son's death. It's just not something that's in Robert to do, not to his best friend at least. Especially after suffering the loss of a child himself, he won't pass that pain on to Ned. He believes that Arya didn't plan for Joffrey to die. She doesn't seem that evil. But with Joff gone, something had to happen. His mind would be focused on finding Nymeria, but once it becomes clear that that won't happen, he sets his sights on Lady. Like canon, the innocent Direwolf is killed so that the royal family can have its pound of flesh. But this isn't enough for Cersei. With so much happening in the light of this tragic event, and the growing tension that could be cut with a knife in the camp, Ned makes a decision. After recent events, he doesn't believe that it would be right for him to serve as Hand of the King anymore. After his daughter played a part in the death of Joffrey, it just doesn't seem right. Cersei shouldn't have to see the people that she associates with her son's death every day. And with Joffrey dead, there is no point in the Starks coming to King's Landing anyway anymore. Sansa's betrothal has been nullified with the death of Joffrey, and it doesn't look as if Robert or Cersei is willing to offer Tommen in his place after what happened to his brother. So Ned decides that it's better if they just go their separate ways. Robert agrees, though it pains him to lose his friend this way. It's the only thing that makes sense right now. There was no way he could have Ned around after this, even if he thought Arya was innocent and the wolf acted alone. He couldn't look at her without seeing his son, and that was the same for Cersei, who was far more vindictive than him. So, at first light, the two parties go their own way. Ned, north to his home, and Robert south to the capital, where he'll hold a funeral for his son and let it be known that Tommen is now his heir. And with Ned gone, he needs to find a new Hand of the King. Things would get tense after Ned's return home. Arya and Sansa are obviously traumatized over the prince's death. Sansa more so since she was supposed to marry him, and she watched him die and felt his blood on her hands. A part of her is still angry at her sister Arya, despite defending her from the queen. so the two of them aren't exactly talking right now. She still blames her for ruining her life, which is difficult enough for Ned. But things would only get worse from here, as when he meets his wife Catelyn, he learns of the attempt on Bran's life while he was away. Catelyn shares her theory that she believes that this was the work of House Lannister. She talks about how expensive the dagger was, and the yellow hair that she found in the tower that Bran supposedly fell from. Coupled with the letter that she got from Lysa, it seems that the Lannisters were up to something, and Bran possibly saw something that he shouldn't have. Catelyn thinks for a moment that Ned could take this information to King Robert, but after learning of Prince Joffrey's death, it doesn't seem like the most plausible idea. With their daughter involved with the prince's death, if Ned suddenly marched in and made accusations to the royal family, it most likely would not end well. He has no standing with the grieving Robert now, even as his friend. He would have no reason to listen, especially since they have no real proof that the Lannisters were involved at all. All they have is a strand of hair, a dagger whose original owner is unknown, and suspicion that is circumstantial at best. Also, with no feasible way to bring this up to King Robert in a way that sounds believable, or a way to garner more information from more knowledgeable sources, like Littlefinger or Varys. They lack connections with the family feud in place, and Ned resigning his hand. So now the Starks are forced to sit on theirs. Eventually, Tyrion makes his way through Winterfell on his way home. Things are more than tense between the Starks and the Lannister after the death of his nephew. He doesn't hate them for what happened. He wasn't really fond of Joffrey, but he was still family. And with the Starks suspecting the Lannisters of foul play, things are not warm in Winterfell to say the least. But regardless, they allow Tyrion to go home uninhibited. Unlike the canon timeline, the Starks have no reason to hold him prisoner. Because of Joffrey's death, Ned returned home. And as a result, Catelyn never went to King's Landing to find him and tell him about the assassination attempt on Bran. So Littlefinger was never able to intercept her and feed her the lie that the dagger belonged to Tyrion. So he's never taken to stand trial in the Vale, sparing the life of Ser Vardis as he will have to fight a trial by combat, and leaving the fate of Bronn somewhat questionable. And because they have no evidence that Tyrion had anything to do with Bran, they have no choice but to let him go unless they want to start a conflict. And things are already rocky with the royal family. With Tyrion now free from capture, instead of raiding the Riverlands, his father Tywin Lannister is given something more productive to do, as the new hand of the king to Robert Baratheon, courtesy of Cersei's influence. In the capital, it takes no time for Tywin to take the reins and start governing in the place of King Robert. Not simply because Robert is rarely seen having an interest in such things like ruling, but because he's also been in a grand stupor since the death of Joffrey. He's been drinking more than usual, and often passes out, unable to attend to the realm. People are beginning to joke that the king has wine for blood. So in his absence, Tywin acts as the realm's authority, much like he did in the times of Mad King Aerys. And while he oversees the realm, he takes time to oversee the upbringing of Prince Tommen, the new heir to the Iron Throne. Cersei has become increasingly attached to Tommen after the death of Joffrey, and Tywin sees this as a detriment to him. Especially if he's going to be king one day, he can't be coddled by his mother all the time. So he makes effort to separate the two of them whenever he can, and does his best to prepare him for the future, often forcing him to attend council meetings, even if only so he can listen, and even giving him lessons in the Tower of the Hand. He takes on a very active role in his life. He's not going to risk another Robert rising to power, or the creation of a second Joffrey. This displeases Cersei, but in the face of her father, there is nothing she can really do. Things progress peacefully for a time, with the Starks in the north and not actively digging into the secrets of House Lannister. Tyrion is given a place at court, though less important as being Hand of the King. He takes a backseat to the real politics at play here with Tywin around now. Because of this, some of his plots like moving Princess Marcella to Dorne and spying on his sister are put aside, though that may be fine for now, as the realm enters a time of relative calm in the coming years. And yes, I did say that. With Joffrey's death so young and Tommen rising as the heir, Cersei, unlike her canon counterpart, doesn't move to kill King Robert so soon. The main reason being that there isn't much point to. The Lannisters have all but taken control of the capital. Cersei isn't being investigated by the Starks, and no battles are being fought. She's under less pressure to ensure her son takes the throne, especially with him being a child too young to truly claim power. He would need a regent if Robert died, and that would likely be Tywin instead of her. Which really isn't such a bad thing when you think about it, but at the same time, there really is no point in killing the king yet. Keeping Robert alive keeps other claimants at bay, and allows Tommen to grow into himself, and seem like a more valuable heir than a dependent child in comparison to Stannis or Renly, and also gives Lannisters time to really consolidate their power in the capital even more. That being said, with Tywin around, he would surely be making deals to secure Tommen's position on the Iron Throne. One of the first things that he would do in this timeline is he got an alliance with the Tyrells. He'd go about this by offering a match between Tommen and Marjorie, since Mace wants his granddaughter to be queen. It will be a long betrothal phase, since it'll be more than a few years before Tommen can grow up, but it'll be worth the wait in the long run. This would likely remove them as allies to Renly in the event of a future conflict, given the new marriage pact. Even if Renly still has Loras on his side, there isn't much benefit to siding with Renly with Marjorie now engaged to the future king, making the Lannisters that much more formidable in this timeline. Barristan Selmy would also stay on as a Kingsguard in this timeline, as with Robert still alive for another 2 or 3 years, neither he, Tommen, or Tywin will believe letting Barristan go is a good idea. That may mean Daenerys ends up getting stung by that scorpion, but who knows. Eventually, King Robert will end up dying with varying beliefs on what happened. Some speculate that he was dealt with secretly, while others believe that he drank himself to death. Nothing gruesome like a boar in this timeline, just a flagon of wine that may or may not have been poisoned, and a bloated belly. Tommen is then crowned the first of his name and King of the Seven Kingdoms, and in response to this, Stannis also rises and proclaims himself to be the true rightful king of Westeros, having already been privy to the truth of the Lannister family through Jon Arryn. Now, with his brother dead, he plans to take his throne back. I believe that after Tommen is crowned king and Stannis rises in opposition, Renly in this timeline actually sides with his older brother. Now lacking the sheer might of House Tyrell, facing the Lannisters with the Stormlands alone would be foolish. So the first chance he gets, he flees the capital and calls the banners of Storm's End to Stannis, who later goes about spreading the information about the origins of Cersei's children. This would later land with the Starks of Winterfell, and give them some much needed information. The truth allows them to consider everything that happened with them up until this point involving the Lannisters. The letter from Lysa, Bran possibly being pushed, the assassin that tried to kill Bran while Ned was away. Things start piecing themselves together, as they figure out why Jon Arryn had been murdered, at least for the reasons that they believe, not knowing that Littlefinger was the one who orchestrated that plot. With this in mind, I believe that Ned would rise in support of Stannis to oust the Pretenders and get revenge, not just for Robert, but Lady, who he was forced to kill, an innocent. The Greyjoys also end up rebelling in this timeline as well, though Theon won't be joining them. Ned has no reason to allow Theon to go back home in this timeline, nor does he have a reason to go back there at all in the first place. In canon, Robb needed ships so that he could attack King's Landing, but Stannis has plenty of ships with his forces on Dragonstone, and with the Stormlands helping them, they probably have even more than that. If they're siding with Stannis, they don't need the Greyjoys, so Theon stays with the Starks, and because of this, Winterfell will never be taken and sacked. This was Theon's plan after all originally. It only happened because he had lived with the Starks for so long, he knew how to take Winterfell from them. Without him going back, Winterfell remains unpillaged and in Stark hands. And Bran and Rickon are never pushed to go explore the far north. So, the War of Five Kings that was delayed for a couple of years turns into the War of Three Kings in this new world, with Tommen, Stannis, and Balon at the helm of this new conflict. But only 2 of these powers are actually being taken seriously, as Balon's plan to hold the North won't hold up in the long run. That being said, Stannis, even with his new reinforcements in this timeline, is still looking at a tough time with the Lannisters and Tyrells working together. This is easily one of the biggest armies in Westeros at the moment, and with all their resources pulled together, it's uncertain if sieging King's Landing is entirely viable with such a mass of soldiers, especially if they can get the Red Wine fleet involved. That would be terrible if Stannis decided to attack by sea. But what I imagine happening is that in an event to break this alliance, Stannis resorts to using shadow magic, courtesy of Lady Melisandre, having Davos smuggle her into King's Landing somehow and get near the Red Keep, where she produces a shadow baby to kill King Tommen. He could have used this to kill Tywin and damage the Lannisters, but even in Tywin's absence, they would still have a chance at winning. They would still have his soldiers, and the Reach has commanders skilled in the art of war the Lannisters could use after he was gone, like Randall Tarley, who once outplayed Robert during the rebellion. So instead of wasting the shadow on Tywin, he takes out Tommen. This eliminates the marriage pact between the Tyrells and the Lannisters, as they wanted a Tyrell to be queen. Now, they're disincentivized to support them in the conflict because there isn't much to gain for them politically, with the only supposed heir to the throne being a young girl. The only other offer the Lannisters could give them to keep them around is by proposing that Myrcella marry Loras Tyrell, and have him be a king consort. But they may not go for this since their children would be born Baratheons and not Tyrells, and in the show, he's the only son of House Tyrell. So unless they make a deal where one child will be a Baratheon and heir to the Iron Throne, and another be named a Tyrell and heir to Highgarden, this might be something they pass on. This move also does a heavy blow to the Lannister image in the eyes of the people, since with Tommen dead and Myrcella being pushed towards queenhood, some people would be less inclined to take this fight seriously. Knowing Westeros, pitting not just a child, but a girl who was ever trained to rule up against a seasoned commander like Stannis is laughable to most people. So I could see some people choosing to break off based on that alone, as they begin to lose faith in the cause. Especially since I'm sure a stigma will begin to form around the Lannisters and their family, having lost such valuable members of it. First Joffrey, then King Robert, and now Tommen. It seems like the family is cursed or something. And that's not even mentioning that with Tommen being unexpectedly murdered, the Lannisters might start tearing themselves apart as they try to find out who killed the king. Assuming that no one saw the shadow do its work, the Lannisters would be in disarray, especially Cersei, who would no doubt be going mad at the loss of another child, and pointing the finger at any and everyone who she might suspect to be some kind of spy from Stannis, who might have killed her son. So with the loss in morale, and potentially in allies, the Lannisters may just be screwed in this timeline, and if Stannis doesn't beat them, then they may just tear themselves apart down the line. But that's all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell me your thoughts down below, and I will see you all next time.